to Varn blog, and today I'm here with Rob Larson, professor of economics, usually a bad word, at Tacoma Community College, and authors of such books as Capitalism versus Freedom and Bit Tyrants, the Political Economy of Silicon Valley. Which I was going to ask you, a whole lot has changed in the political economy of Silicon Valley in the last, 7 months. What do you think is the biggest shift that you might not have been able to look at in your book from 3 years ago?
Yeah, well, of course, man, anytime you lock the manuscript on a book, the clock's ticking. But most of the book, is on the big five companies, there's the giant tech platforms. And their dominance isn't really going anywhere, at least so far. The European Union is the only thing, really going after them with teeth, and so far making some modest changes. Time will tell. We can look at the details, but Apple just won Epic's appeal over its control of the App Store, and Google's going strong so far in its court cases. So time will tell on how much the core thesis of the book about the power of those platforms because of the economic phenomenon of net effects. We'll see how long that thesis lasts. But there's been a bunch of crazy stuff, the crypto bubble crashed, NFTs came and then crashed. And of course, the big regional / tech bank panic of last month was, that one's juicy. But the basic political economy landscape of big tech hasn't changed. It finally got big enough to do a retrenching with real layoffs. That is a first for the industry, other than Microsoft, of course. So it's an interesting story, but the fundamentals are still in place.
Do you foresee seeing that it looks like we're going to lose a whole lot of techers to other parts of the economy, and right now they are being absorbed back in? It's not like we've had the tech layoffs have not led to large scale general unemployment. Although I will say, I think every economist I know, left, right, and center, seems to think that conditions are going to get real weird when you have a no growth time period of the economy that might technically be a recession, but there's just so few people in the labor market where you might not see, at least at first, super high unemployment corresponding with that. What do you make of that scenario? That's also something we haven't really seen before historically.
Indeed. And it's true. We're seeing tech layoffs, and they're big by historical standards for entities like Google, which just grew straight through the last big recession, and had been pretty unstoppable in its growth trajectory prior to all this. But they're pretty modest. The rest of the job market is really tight. As you say, these tech layoffs are going to immediately get snatched up by the rest of the economy, where people are desperate for tech and IT security and all kinds of stuff related to that. So the cloud ad spend is coming down. Advertising tracks the GDP pretty closely. As far as what that GDP is going to do, are we going to have a recession or just a stagnation period? That's what we like to call it when the economy doesn't grow for a period of time. Tough call. I'm out of the forecasting business these days. It's unusually complex headwinds right now between, the cut down but still going strong inflation wave we experienced, all the other COVID after effects, the biggest one being every time society goes through a big plague wave, it kills a bunch of the workforce or drives them out of the workforce, into the pandemic retirements, or all the women who are still out of the workforce to take care of kids because there's no daycare, or they're learning remotely in school or whatever. Whenever that takes place, it always puts bargaining power in the hands of the workforce. This is considered to be one of the things that led to the end of feudalism was that big Black Death, which killed about a third of the European countryside and put, for the first time, bargaining power in the hands of the peasantry, and they can be more mobile, and you start getting things like labor markets that lead to capitalism and stuff. So these big events like COVID always have these big year-long whiplashes in the data that you see over time. But between that and inflation and the Russo-Ukrainian war and the bank panics, it is anybody's guess whether we avoid a recession or have a soft landing where we just bring unemployment back up, which is the openly stated goal. without causing a whole recession, which Wall Street doesn't want. The Fed doesn't want a recession, but they'd rather have that than high inflation. That's like the bane of Wall Street, you know. But man, time will tell. I don't have, you know, even the economic prognosticators whose work I like is, you know, inconsistent these days just because there's so many imponderables, more than normal even.
I think that's been a key thing for me is we've seen a whole lot of uncertainty with these imponderables, particularly with like left economists playing in geopolitics. Sometimes I think irresponsibly predicting this or that, like decline of the dollar, which I do think de-dollarization is probably on the long-term horizon, but short-term horizon, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, especially because, of course, yeah, the U.S. dollar for all these years since the Bretton Woods conference, you know, following World War II, like the dollar has been like the currency for global commodities trade and like sovereign debt payments and all these other crucial things. So even though we run like gigantic economic deficits in the United States and our trade and current account for decades on end, it doesn't matter because the dollar is the world reserve currency. Like everyone always wants to hold it. Every corporate entity and national bank and overseas, you know, wants to be able to hold those dollars for those important transactions. So we're seeing real moves away from the dollar. You know, so China is doing more commerce with Russia in yuan, of course, and you know, Brazil even has been signing contracts now for deliverables that won't be denominated in the dollar. Like Lula said publicly, he wonders at night, he said, why so much of commerce is denominated in dollars. It's because of the Bretton Woods conference. But that reflects, of course, like America's gradually declining, you know, global status as just the sole superpower in China's rising position, which everyone is aware of, and every Westerner is reacting by pulling their hair out and screaming, no, we're going to remain the number one power, which just lets you know, like, we're going to do it the worst way. We're going to manage our decline in the most self-destructive manner. Declining powers always do that. You know, they always do things that they think are going to reverse their decline, like they invade Ukraine, or they vote for Brexit, or they get Donald Trump in. Like all these things just hasten the decline of these countries. So we are seeing moves away from the dollar, and that would be incredible. Like if anything would put America in its place for the first time since like the 20th century, like it would be that. It would be the loss of our world reserve status and actually forcing us to like have balance of payments that are, you know, anywhere near being in the black. So again, so many unpredictable factors play into that, including like the big geopolitical stuff, like the Russian, Chinese, Ukraine, U.S. relationship. But like you are seeing moves in that direction. We should realize like the dollar has been so dominant. Like we're seeing moves, but it's starting from a position of just complete dominance of the dollar and the U.S. systems for financial payments and clearance of those payments and so on. So long road to go, I guess. Long Silk Road to go.
Yeah, and one hand, it's happened really fast. I mean, 2 years is a pretty fast time. On the other hand, however, left economists in particular have been big on predicting the imminent collapse of the dollar while the dollar is getting stronger and stronger. In fact, the irony of right now is as much as geopolitics is driving this, de-dollarization is happening because the dollar is just getting too expensive.
And it's also seen to be less reliable. And man, on top of everything else, we should throw in there like the biggest, even more than like the war and inflation and COVID, the biggest question mark, and the Federal Reserve, like the biggest question in front of our faces right now is the debt ceiling, which could, we may go hurtling through that limit like in the next several weeks or not till the end of the summer. It's completely up in the air. Tax collections are coming in a little weak, but not disastrous. So today's Republican House caucus is such a complete mess of media posers and right-wing influencers. There's not even an agenda that, like, John Boehner in the past might have been able to wrangle a Republican caucus into agreeing to. My guess is going to be that we default on the debt, which is just an incredible, who can say? And everyone always backs down once Wall Street freaks out because they are, like, the great power behind the government and certainly, the legislature. So maybe they'll get them to, shut up and accept a compromise at the last minute again. But last time this happened in 2011, for God's sake, Standard & Poor's and the credit rating agencies downgraded U.S. debt for no reason. We can easily pay our bills. We just have such a spastic media fascist caucus that runs Congress every few years. Difficult just to avoid those incredible, again, self-inflicted wounds. Man, if that happens, I mean, that will be a real, it's amazing these people are very hawkish, but that's got to be every country that would like to be in charge's like greatest dream, is that we purposelessly default on the debt because we're too incompetent and are mainly just here to perpetuate our future right-wing media careers rather than like advance legislation of some type.
I mean, one of the things about that is very interesting in regards to the Republican Party is we've also seen this happen at a state level. Like, we are seeing Republicans actually damage their state's economies to own the libs, which is going to be interesting as things become more and more real.
Yeah, indeed. Watching DeSantis just openly threatening to go after Disney because some time ago they opposed a anti-trans education bill, and now because the cadre of media personalities they put in charge of his new board didn't pay attention, Disney was able to litigate. Was able to get approvals for 30 years worth of development right under their noses. Like, it is true, but it's because of clumsiness. Like, these people support markets, but they're such like clumsy dummies. They don't know obviously anything about the economy. It's incredible to see that. I kind of think the right wing has just won so much on the economy that they're down to like, well, I think we should shoot the walls of banks to prove how cool we are.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting trend. I mean, one thing I think we have to look at with this is I don't know that with the bourgeoisie, with the actual capitalists, that they have a lot of faith in the GOP anymore. And that a lot of people might think that's good for the left, but I don't necessarily know that it is.
No, I see it as negative because, of course, to the extent that is true, and it's definitely a growing concern, that you can't, your country club constituency can't trust the Republicans like you used to. It's no longer McConnell's party, It's true, but their response is just to be, well, thank God we have the other corporate capitalist party, and they just turn to the Democrats. Like, that has kind of become my medium-term political fear, is the Republicans just become the blood and soil fascist party, and the Democrats become the old Republican party of kind of nonpartisan, business-oriented legislation, and we'll end up like in France, where it's fascism versus neoliberalism, and there's no possibility of a social democratic option.
Yeah, I was not to get into political speculation, but the shadow of Macron losing to Le Pen, ironically, because of workers' militancy, and Mélenchon and the French left not being able to take advantage of that, leading to a victory that will probably, if it does happen, in the EU. I mean, like, that's a real possibility from that result. So yeah, these things seem a lot weird. I get why people why other countries are not wanting to deal with U.S. hegemony anymore. At the same time, though, there is a complication to this end of the U.S. dollar that I think some people look at, but a lot of people don't. And that is the fact that despite trading in yuan with Russia, and right now, when you see China act, they're pushing things like trading in Swiss francs, because I don't think they want to take on the kind of problems to their own internal economy that being the only reserve currency would do, because you kind of have to look like the United States. Like,
indeed. And this is getting slightly outside my own personal wheelhouse, but yeah, my impression is that China, like, actually to an extent would prefer a multipolar world, not just rhetorically, but actually. I don't think China has any interest in, taking over the role that we've had in the Middle East or overthrowing governments like in the Cold War standard. But obviously they would like to have a regional sphere of influence, which most powerful countries aspire to have. I think they'd be happy to have a European Union that's independent of the US and a Russia that's more or less a separate force, It seems earnest. And, when you're a rising power against a big central power, it's in your interest to have multiple rising centers of power. After all, like you say, yeah, it avoids putting on you like the mantle of the new American successor in global leadership, and it distributes focus around. Maybe the narrative in the world isn't just you're the new rising power, and we've all got to fence you in with encircling military alliances. It becomes about just the decline of another country. Yeah.
So
indeed, not all these trades are in Chinese currency. Like that's true. I think they're content just to see it sort of fracture down to a broader use of currency.
Yeah, I think they would be happy to have a basket of currencies, of which the dollar would still probably be a big part of it, but it would be a regional big, and that's given if the debt ceiling thing doesn't happen. If the debt ceiling thing happens, the bond market would collapse, and
yeah, indeed. I mean, we'd expect a huge plunge in all the equity markets, and I mean, in every market that there is. I mean, the U.S. dollar and specifically like Treasury bonds have just always been the keystone of our entire, last 80 years of economic growth. My God, I mean, if you listen to these boobs in the House, like they have no idea what the stakes are or what the details are. We'll just prioritize payments. Like that's a default. As soon as someone doesn't get paid on time, it's a default. You're not going to fool the global credit rating agencies by like, well, we just didn't pay bureaucrats. We met our bond payments. We're not in default. No, you're in default. You're breaking other legal agreements that you did to pay us. That's defaulting. Like that's many countries have tried that shit that have, unlike us, actually have precarious finances, but aren't run by just complete self-destructive TV hacks. Yeah.
I mean, arguably, this would make us not maybe like Argentina because we still have a ton of productive capacity, but it would make us look a lot like Great Britain right now, which is fastly becoming an Argentina, frankly.
Not a comparison you want made. Indeed. Yeah. And I mean, really, Britain, I think, is the ultimate example of these countries that are just like, well, we're still the top 5 of countries. If we want to break off from the economy that we buy all of our materials from and sell all of our exports to, that's fine. We'll be a new independent force. Like, no, you won't. Like you'll be an independent country that corporations have all the leverage over, and they'll hollow you out like they hollowed out everyone else. Indeed. Yeah. It's in regards to their stubbornly high inflation and everything else. I mean, Britain right now, its economy is in such a goofy state. So many years of recession out of the last 20. I mean, they have never caught up since the 2008 crash. Pretty brutal to see. Anyway, so much of it is the legacy of 2016, and of course, all the austerity that preceded it. Of course.
Yeah, I think this is the Brexit vote's going to be unpaying for a while. Although it's the irony is that there's a truth to the fact that the conditions of the European Union's agreement with the UK actually did lead to hyper-exploitation of, say, Eastern European EU members and be able to leverage that to keep their wages suppressed.
Oh, absolutely. It's true. I mean, we're looking at this from the basis of, yes, of growth and, national rise and decline. Of course, the core of it all is just built on exploiting whoever is the most exploitable labor force you can get your hands on. For Britain until Brexit, it was the East European workforce, no doubt. Now here in the U.S., we have such a tight labor market after COVID and just the fact that, you can't make money working an American job anymore. It's relatively easy to pull people out of it. So we're just like, oh, what do you know? We're finding a return of child labor, and numerous states are passing, loosening their laws about kids working in bars and in retail and in hospitality. And we have this big scandal about these, undocumented migrant children friggin' working in construction and customer service. It's incredible. But yeah, at the bottom, all this, of course, is built on exploiting the property lists. I mean, that's just the rock we walk on in the United States.
So one thing I have to ask when I think about this right now is that we are going to see massive labor changes. And I think, I don't think ChatGPT is going to replace everybody, but I do think it's going to replace a whole lot of what we used to consider entry-level data, white-collar work. Just like, frankly, automated data processing already did in the last 10 years. And
yeah, I think people are going to be surprised, like how much like certain fields, especially just like communications, Like already we're having little mini scandals where entities put out some announcement and it's just, they forget to take out the tag at the end that says, generated by ChatGPT. And I think also just speaks to how empty like public communication is now. Like if you're going to put out a statement from a university saying you're opposed to a strike, or for some company apologizing for spilling chemicals somewhere, like it's such a boilerplate process. Like it plays right into the strengths of this kind of AI, So you could see it having a major place there for like white collar work. Absolutely will be affected by this. I mean, so many white collar people laughed off, automation and globalization when it was blue collar people getting the chop and outsourcing car. And, as we found out munitions plants lately, as it turns out we can barely supply Ukraine right now. This is, it'll come for you too soon enough, PMC. You will not be spared. Don't you know at the end of the movie, the villain sacrifices his evil sidekick to preserve his plan? I mean, everyone knows that.
Well, I mean, that to me is sort of the problem with over focusing on the PMCs, because I've always been like, in so much that it is a real class, we've already seen the credential weaken. In fact, the movement was hyper credentialization for things that didn't used to require a credential at all, then devaluing the credential. Then I think we're seeing now, and I've seen this in insurance companies, we're seeing this in teaching, at least in red states, removing the need for the credential after you devalued it, but still having the pay raise ties to having the credential so you can pay lower too. And then ending on, basically hollowing out the field. And I think we're going to see that in a lot of places. You can't so much do it in nursing, but you can definitely do it in teaching. And I think the child labor thing is interesting because I've been predicting that for about 2 years. I'm like, okay, are they really going to double down and not open borders up? I guess they're not. Well, eventually in these red states where there's just not a whole lot of work in the first place, but there's also less and less people and there's a massive brain drain, they're just going to have to start removing labor restrictions. And the easiest ones to remove are child labor restrictions. What other things might we see as because one thing I can say is I'm not seeing Democrats push back on this very much, like rhetorically. Like people are online, yeah, but I'm not seeing we don't see any Democratic senators like making a big deal of return the child labor in these states, because I think they realize they don't have an answer to it.
Indeed. And yeah, I mean, you will see noise about this in the Senate for sure, but it'll be from your reliable couple of voices. Certainly not from the senators, in these states that are growing most reliant on this. It's difficult to anticipate, I find, how this will evolve. Recently reviewed a book for Jacobins discussing automation and how much of what we in the West now think of as being sophisticated algorithms that are produced by the tech platforms in search and in other areas are actually just the actual manual work of people in the developing world being paid on a micro task basis and being paid micro wages for it. But we don't see that because we just see the tech, the tech interface. And the author made this very thoughtful point, which is automation is only viable if it's cheaper than paying people. And often it isn't because we pay so friggin' little. So it's up in the air how these things get deployed. Everyone knows, technology and its use, it's very historically contingent, and we all know that it's based on material forces. Industrialization could have got us the millennium and luxury, gay, space communism. Instead, we get Taylorism to exploit us to the maximum amount and make us appendages of the machine. So in my mind, this is sort of unpredictable just because there's no visible end to the global ranks of affordable labor. As you said, I mean, these every Western state, and Japan and everybody is just tripling down on their xenophobic refusal to admit people. And entities like the Biden administration are having to resort to all these side little obscure paths to let in a little bit of labor here and a little bit of tech labor here. And here's some people who can go and get manual jobs, trying to sleight of hand some healthy migration into a country, at a time when people, of course, obviously we should just throw in here the subtext of so much international migration is people fleeing countries that we in the West destroyed economically or often militarily. So of course the whole side of justice, let alone economic rationality, is at least a dramatic liberalization of our immigration systems, if not open borders, regardless of exactly what that refers to. It's impressive. I don't know, man. It's up in the air. We'll see how much administrations and the political forces are able to keep out migrant labor. I don't know. I find that to be like a huge, I don't know. I feel like I say this a lot, but I feel like that's a major question for us, is just how long people will prefer the trade-off of imagined racial purity in a country that's, which is such a hilarious idea already, having that rather than having like a functioning economy where you have an adequate labor supply and you can get things in a timely manner, and we hold the price increases down that are indeed beating up blue collar families. I don't know, like you have enough crazy right wing political momentum. I mean, if Brexit and Trump taught us anything, and there's enough crazy grievance mongering among conservative aging boomers that they're willing to put through things that just hurt the economy. Brexit itself, again, I mean, these things were just expected to take points off their GDP and their economic growth rate, and they have. And now it's harder to exploit the labor that runs the whole system. An amazing time to be watching policy.
One thing I have to wonder, that this is going to get particularly dark, is how much these states are where it's not just about racial purity, although clearly that's part of the popular ideology, and I don't want to like diminish that. But it's also fear of instability from climate refugees that are going to start pouring in if things don't change pretty quickly.
Indeed, and I think people are still really underestimating, what the proportions of what's in front of us. I mean, again, just going by the very median, relatively actually mild projections of public and United Nations climate entities, mild in the sense of not going with their most extreme possible projections. Large parts of the developing world are projected to become uninhabitable within less than a century. And most of all, the Persian Gulf and the Indian subcontinent, which is just an incredibly dreadful thing to contemplate. And these are some of the most ancient societies that the world owes so much to historically and culturally and scientifically, and they could become depopulated if we continue just blasting fossil fuels into the atmosphere and changing its chemistry so fast. Already we're having this huge increase in days where it's incredibly dangerous to simply go outside and do anything in the Deccan Plateau in India and all the littoral around the Persian Gulf and Iraq and Iran. Incredible to see that it's so early and we're seeing those heights. I mean, what that portends is, by the end of our lifetimes, significant population movements are going to be happening far larger than what we're already seeing today. I mean, that's just the most basic reading of the science, just indicates that people are not going to be able to survive in these beautiful ancient countries. Like it really is like such a twisted, dark, as you said, thing to contemplate. And what it means will be, a typhoon of desperate refugees trying to get to the northern mid-latitudes where climate effects are projected to be milder. And of course, where the countries are that are responsible for this whole friggin' mess in the first place, where it's going to be more and more fortressy to keep those people out. Once there's a large enough number, it becomes difficult for militaries and navies to keep out like a huge, overwhelming number of people. God forbid. I mean, I certainly hope we can come up with something with the climate movement to forestall the worst of that, because, again, just based on the climate projections for those regions, it's pretty hellish to contemplate what could be in front of us at this rate.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. I think there's a whole lot of these developments around demographic shifts, and you hear a lot about the declining demographic shifts of, say, Europe or Peter Zion liking to make a big deal out of it in China, which I will admit there's going to be a fairly massive quick shift downwards in population in China as well. But then I'm like, we have people who are going to need to move, and I think these societies will accommodate them to survive. I don't know though. I mean, like societies doubling down on irrational things, unfortunately,
Yeah,
do
tough call.
happen. Like,
Yeah,
but
these days it doesn't give you a lot of confidence to see that. Even though, I mean, you're right, it's like economically impeccable logic. You have aging populations, you really need young people. Like the big concern everyone says is we have to get rid of entitlements and raise the French retirement age and trim Social Security. Why? Because we don't have enough young people working to support the old people. And of course, it's bullshit. We could just tax, the wealthy to pay for these things. There's no reason why pensions have to come out of a payroll tax. Really, we're the only ones who do that in the first place. But economically, the logic of it is impeccable. You need young workers. The world is exploding with young people who are trying so hard to come here and work some shitty job that no one wants, and no one wants their kids to work in the United States. But someone needs to wash the plates in the restaurant, and someone needs to mow the lawns here. Like, no one wants their kid to do it, but they want it to get done. But I also don't want any scary foreigners to come in with their own language and really good food and ruin my lovely white community. It seems impossible that we would go on inflicting this kind of damage on ourselves. But after what we've seen, I mean, if any sensibility is going to be present in the system, it's going to be imposed on it by some kind of resurgent left in some kind of scenario. Otherwise, yes, it's difficult to foresee it changing after what we've been through lately. My God.
Yeah, I definitely worry about this a lot because we are seeing on one hand, I don't love the idea of like taking mass scales of workers just because we want cheap labor. On the other hand, it was Reagan who liberalized immigration largely in a cynical scheme to not deal with the immediate demographic effects of the baby boomers in the 80s. And now that that's hit, we've gone in the other direction from the same side that was from the liberalizers in the past. And this is not to praise Reagan. It was pernicious. It's just like guest worker programs in Europe are pernicious, but at least it made some evil rational calculus sense, where right now I don't see that.
Yeah, pretty much. I would say that same generation that's gradually getting around to retiring and creating this, in part, this need for a partially overseas sourced labor force. Like, it's their weird, unnecessary, late in life racism that's changed the political base of the Republican Party and made it people who might have been neutral-ish toward immigration in the Reagan era, very hostile to it now. And in the Reagan era, I mean, that's like the early days of neoliberalism. People still had the New Deal social compact in their hearts then. People are willing to support immigration and spending to cope with the environment at least a little. Or like affirmative action for racial minorities in the US. People are much more willing to support this stuff when they feel the economic times are good, when they feel the economy is growing and there's room for everybody, there's opportunity for everyone here in America with our free economy. Then people will support that stuff. Like, as soon as we get a recession or long-term economic austerity because of neoliberalism for the past 40 odd damn years, people lose that confidence. They're like, wow, you can't pay for anything anymore. It's hard to get by. What happened to all the jobs? Maybe it's all for foreigners. I think that the change in the nation's character that Reagan brought about with those same voters are the ones that made them late in life significantly more, immigration xenophobic than they might have been, in the 80s when they voted for him. But it's just the workings of, I think, what happens to people's generosity when you shift from a system with a real social safety net to one where people are, as we always say on the left, doing GoFundMes for their insulin. It's people feel they're desperate. They don't have that generosity of spirit that people think that they need to have to let immigrants into the country. Not that really makes sense, but it's true. And yeah, it's tough to anticipate what's going to happen. I mean, these younger people now are a completely different generation from the boomers. But will we have a stable society long enough for them to become in charge? Who knows?
I think a lot about that too. One thing I want to ask you though is in this era of instability and with a lot of the fiscal levers that we've had probably going away. I mean, one of the things that I believe in the descriptive reality of like modern monetary theory. If you're dealing with a core economy, I am much more skeptical in its ability to do things, and non-core economies, or if core economies get super weak and you have trade parity, the kinds of like, oh, we can force everyone to take our money that the US does and makes something like MMT seem completely viable, becomes a lot harder to do, because there's a lot of modern monetary theory assumptions that assume basically national autarkies, which don't actually exist.
Yeah.
So what should the left be doing right now?
Yeah, well, for MMT itself, I mean, I went to UMKC personally, so I'm, very familiar with a number of like the most nationally prominent figures supporting it, and I think, independent thinking about monetary policy and so on, like, is a healthy thing. I'm glad people are discussing that. That's cool. It is true. I mean, my main criticism of MMT all this time, has been that like it's mainly for economies like powerful enough to issue like real anchor fiat currencies, or as you said, core economies, which very well expresses it. The United States, potentially the EU or China, you can conceive of them having enough global importance and commitment to their fiat currencies to be able to get away with, running a significant program of monetary expansion to fund expansionary fiscal policy. But I mean, for most countries, it's just out of the question. I mean, and honestly, that to me is a pretty damning weakness. If a policy idea can't be done by like Brazil or India, major economies, but they would have who thinks they could do that? Like, I've never heard anyone argue that. I think people are sort of taking for granted it's something that's like, for the big Western states or the European Union, which, just weakens, its relevance in my mind. But to me, the big thing is my main concern with, I would say this, I like MMT because I feel like anything that makes Americans less deficit hawkish is good.
Agreed.
And what I don't like about it is I feel like this makes people think, oh, we don't have to fight the big battles to tax the rich to pay for all this stuff, rather than just having a electronic money printing policy. Like, taxing the rich isn't just to fund all of our great progressive policy and Medicare for all and, exploring the universe and stuff. It's to take money out of the bastards' hands so that they can't quite so easily purchase the media or buy off our damn senators all the time. So I like that it makes people less scared of deficits. Like, that is phenomenal. The fact that it takes some of the focus off, we tax the rich not just to fund our good shit, but also to take the money away from them. How does this plan make Elon Musk not able to buy communication platforms? Like, that is a weakness of MMT. It doesn't do enough to castrate the satanic power of the ruling class, in my opinion.
My critique of MMT has not been its descriptive, but it's similar to you. It's that it doesn't have a realistic view of class power, and thus a lot of its normative fixes are not, they're utopian, actually, not because it's not possible, but because there's no reason why a capitalist power would ever do any of that.
Yeah, and if we had a movement to like make that happen, why don't we just socialize investment, for God's sake? Like, why are we leaving?
Right, exactly.
This is the Federal Reserve and the Treasury in charge of this stuff. Like, fuck those Wall Street scumbags. Like, why are we? This, it's just, I mean, it has the merit of being something we could do with the existing institutions. You could argue that's a merit because it doesn't require huge movements that change institutions over years to take place. So fair enough. But I think, that cuts both ways. It also means it's not transformative enough of an idea to be like one of our main policy goals. I'm all about like auditing the Fed and stuff like that. But until we have a totally different economic system, I mean, the Fed's important. In its evil role, it keeps our messed up system on its feet, which, you don't necessarily want everyone thrown into unemployment again to get socialism. I hope it doesn't require that.
Right. I guess if you're a market socialist and you believe in like people's banking, and I'm open on these questions. I'm open on markets one way or the other. I tend to be somewhat market skeptical, but if you're a market socialist and you promote something like a people's bank, then yes, I would be all about MMT conditions, but that's a political project that needs more ambitions than just like a fiscal fix.
Yeah, that's already so much bigger. Yeah, exactly. I feel like anything to bring this about would just automatically have so much bigger stakes than than a departure on monetary policy kind of deals with.
Right. And so I guess my big push on the MMT left is like, okay, fine. Even if you're right, let's stop pretending, however, that this is just something we could get elites to do Stephanie Kelton style. Like, or that the Democratic Party would do this because they understand that, that, because I always hear them in tears say, "Oh, like, well, the Republicans understand that deficits don't matter actually, and Democrats don't." And I'm like, I think all these sides understand more than you give them credit for, right?
I definitely agree with you there. I mean, Republicans know that deficits do matter. You use them to destroy the social welfare state. What do you mean you think Republicans think they don't matter? That's running them up with military spending and tax cuts is how they create the pressure to sooner or later go after Social Security. It's been so popular, they struggle with that. But they know the political value of it, even if it's, for their own evil ends. Like, I think that's a pretty I wouldn't say typically cosmetic, but that's a very cosmetic reading of these configurations.
Yeah, I agree. Not to to come at another left economic ideology, so pivot away from that a little bit, but I do think it feels very hard now to be a leftist and say we have a good answer for the current problems in the United States. It's also not going to be hard on the world, because as a leftist, I do actually think we have to think about that. Like, I've wondered, like, if we had power and we wanted to, say, really have a responsible left-wing foreign policy to start ramping down American imperialism without a disaster or a crisis, obviously a lot of concessions would have to be made to states like China. We'd probably need to change our immigration policy, probably need to change our land ownership policy in general. But beyond that, we'd also need to talk about, like, helping places ramp up currencies, alternative currencies that were safe, and also encouraging them to still trade with us, but without the labor arbitrage and trade disparity that's normally included in these free trade deals, because these free trade deals are always ironic. They were never free trade deals. Like, they usually were like good for American businesses, kind of bad for American workers, and terrible for everything in the countries who we're trading with deals. Like,
much more like mercantilism, these free trade deals, which is amusing, because that's almost the opposite of what free trade is about. It's true. I mean, well, in my mind, if we the left, had real policymaking authorities, I mean, you'd be seeing such a different operating landscape in the first place. I mean, in my mind, like any, real left-wing movement that comes to power in a Western state, I mean, among its policies has got to be capital grants as reparations to the developing world countries that we fucked over 50 ways to get rich, or to get our wealthy people rich in our countries. Which is a hell of a political lift, actually, aiding countries like the way conservatives think that all of our money does, because they're not familiar with reality and budget numbers. But like, that's something that, would be on the table. Like, and after all, like, part of the idea with immigration is like, yes, the West needs immigration, so it suits our economic needs and our GDP and so on. But like, the goal is for people to get to live in their countries. Very few people who aren't already from a developed country just want to leave their own country. People like want to live where they know people, where they have family, where they speak the damn language, for God's sake. Pull up stakes and go to some totally alien society that also doesn't want you there, and has like ugly laws like America and Australia and the European Union do to keep out migrants. Like, who wants that? Like, these people would rather be in their own countries, but we've made them so intolerable and economically just completely suffocating that people are pouring out of these countries. So like, a program of capital grants that like helps to rebuild in part these countries and let them have a socialist program of development, like, that's how we create the positive foundation for things like maybe some kind of currency block. I mean, the problem for these developing world countries is, it's the Algerian real. What's that worth? These countries struggle with their currencies getting dumped, and they have to spend a ton of money building up reserves so that their bond buyers are happy that they have emergency funds and so on. Like, that's part of how we keep these countries shackled to their debts and so on, So having larger international blocks for currencies, like an African Union currency to go with the Euro currency for the European Union, like something like that. Like, that's how you get a bloc strong enough to have sovereign monetary policy and do MMT if that's what they feel they want, But to me, like, the economics, the fundamentals of our relationships with these countries would have to change a lot if you have a socialist economic order worthy of the name, that it kind of puts all these issues, of currency and policy kind of, not in their place, but in perspective, because, I mean, so much structurally would have to change first to get to that point.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I mean, one thing we have to really look at when we're talking about international order issues. uh, I mean, one of the ironies actually of the multipolar world is like, for a long time, China really struggled, particularly after the end of the Soviet Union, to save our international order. And they effectively kind of did it in 2008, which I don't think we give them enough credit for.
They did everything we told them to do, and arguably spent us out of that recession. You could argue, people make that macro case.
Yeah, I don't think it's an absurd case to make. I don't think it's clear, but I think it's at least justifiable.
It's a plausible argument, at least. Yeah.
Right. And so, I remember I was listening to Radio War Nerd recently, and they were talking about it's actually surprising it's taking China this long to make these kinds of outthings. And I'm like, yeah, and they're actually fairly modest. They're just like, we're gonna finally make the Saudis and the Houthis talk and tell the Saudis to give up on this war they can't possibly really win. And we'll get credit for that, and we'll get good deals out of it because the United States is pissed, Mohammed bin Salman off by.
Yeah, just Joe Biden's one remark, which is 1/20th of what the Saudis deserve to hear. Like, that was enough to piss off little baby Prince enough to, have a real effect on the global distribution of power. Amazing, isn't it? How small of a thing these delicate, vain, and these people are all rich and powerful. They never hear anyone but kissing their ass. So as soon as they're ever criticized, it's like a thunderclap to them, It is amazing, though, man. It's true. And China playing this giant role in the economy. Everyone in the West, used to take credit for it. Like, well, we made China big. They should become, liberalized more. And now it's just China's evil, and they fooled us, and they stole our economy somehow. Definitely a instupiding has happened with regard to China over the last few years, too. I just remember Rick Scott, that hideous golem senator from Florida with the biggest Medicare fraud judgment in U.S. history on his record. He ran the Republican Senate campaign last year into a big fat ditch where they lost seats when the other party was incumbent in the White House, and they had an inflation year, for God's sake, like everything on their side, and they lost seats. And this guy is going on TV and he says, every American has to think in their heart, China is my enemy. It's like, you're the one who put out a policy plan to cut Social Security and raise taxes on the poor, which was like specifically delineated. Like, you're the enemy, Scott, not China, which would like to have a peaceful rise to global influence for itself. And I think actually, probably like some kind of multipolar world like we used to have for most of world and indeed Chinese history. Western dominance is still relatively fresh on the time scale of Chinese history.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. One of the things I think, I think we have to be realistic about what this means, and a left should, like, for example, probably not start pretending that China's fully grown, completely socialist economy or something like that, because that's I don't know. I don't think you can participate in the world markets like the way they do and be a fully socialized economy, frankly. But I do think we just have to be way more responsible about this. And one of the things that I have seen, I was thinking today about 2008, believe it or not. And during that time period, because they were providing cheap teachers and schools wanted to cut their foreign language department, everybody was taking Confucius Institute teachers of China and talking about how we're going to integrate with the Chinese economy, blah, 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 blah. And it literally took the pivot to Asia, particularly after 2010, and for that to start to fall apart. Now, I was always ambivalent about the Confucius Institute Chinese teaching program because it basically was undercutting teachers out of jobs. That's why they were doing it, is they didn't want to pay full wages. China was footing the bill for these teachers, and they were also getting Chinese wages, not U.S. wages when working in the United States, which dramatically reduced their cost to either nothing or very little to the school districts. But I can't imagine that happening now. I mean, like, I know that program still technically exists, but I almost guarantee you no one's using it. And so it's been interesting.
We're throwing TikTok out now, for God's sake,
Yeah.
because it's, I mean, my God. I mean, we're throwing out the idiot hot teen dancing app because it's from China. I mean, yeah, we've traveled some distance since then. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about that because I'm like, you know, as much as I would love to ban TikTok as a educator,
I've got a challenge for you. Throw your phone in the garbage challenge. That's
right. I don't want to ban TikTok for any of the reasons given, nor do I want to take people's free speech away, which seems both of those motives are behind this Restrict Act.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it becomes really transparent when they're like, and we're gonna have the Department of Homeland Security intersect with the Chamber of Commerce on who's a security threat.
We're in good hands here. Like, that's difficult to conceive of two worse institutions to be in charge of policy decisions. That's, you know, we want American apps that destroy the brains of young people, not foreign ones. Foreign ones from foreigners. It's terrible. Yeah, it's amazing that people are taking that seriously. I mean, you know, Snowden's leaks were all about, like, yeah, the U.S. government is using our domestic companies to look at all the metadata from all your text messaging. And our concern is maybe TikTok is spying on our idiot teens, and they'll know all of our teens' skin regimen secrets, or maybe the nuclear launch codes if you put those on TikTok. It's pretty amazing. It takes a while for people to get, into a crazy racist fervor, I guess is what we're seeing here. You can get away without that for a while, maybe.
So I guess this does leave us to kind of turn this to what can we do? I mean, one of the things I think we have to deal with is, even though we were all patting ourselves on the back, well, I actually kind of wasn't, but most of us were patting ourselves on the back about the Democrats not losing nearly as bad as we normally predict them to lose in the midterms just in November 2022. And I've heard a lot of hand wrangling from even people who I normally respect, like Robert Brenner and Dylan Riley, that make it seem like that Biden's going to embrace some kind of neo-progressive agenda, far after COVID, which I think is pretty clearly being undone right now. What do we think they can do now that they've lost Congress? I mean, in a political sense, and I don't actually think even the Democrats are just nihilistic, but in a political sense, being like, okay, you know what? Pull the debt ceiling bomb and destroy us all so that we can finally be rid of you.
That would be, inshallah. But, like the party will exist as long as the base exists, and a racist, dumb base in this country will always probably endure. And frankly, I mean, the Republican Party base now is mainly a media institution. I mean, that's why conservatives have such political force and why they can act together, which they often still do. We did lose abortion last year, after all. Like, as shambolic and crazy as they become, like, they still have the organization that comes from being funded by billionaires. So you have structure and institutional memory and shit like that. I would love for it to come crashing down, for people to blame the idiot right of society. They won't. I mean, they'll have media that tells them, and if only penniless black migrants from Haiti hadn't caused this financial meltdown, and idiots will believe it. I mean, people who are not familiar with the world except through the weird online and media, lens that overlays everything that happens in the eyes of people. I don't know. I think if it comes down like that, I think it's going to be pretty hard on everyone across the spectrum there. People are going to be furious, and I don't know if they're going to react in a thoughtful way. It's unpredictable, though. Again, I almost made a prediction there. I stopped myself. Got to be careful. This is a baffling ass era. Like, even the things we see that make sense, that are, enduring patterns, like, there's just so much. It's a turbulent era right now, and it sucks. They're exciting to read about, but they're stressful to friggin' live through. So as far as like what we can do going forward in this specific era, it's difficult. Like, so much of what we can do is just like basic, institution building that the right has a 20-year edge on us with because they're funded by billionaires, and you can build things up if you have lots of money that endures over time. But we're seeing like a fairly real like labor wave right now. Like it's not enormous historically, but it's like often they start with just ripples and wildcat teacher strikes and train brakemen about to go on strike and Congress stops them. Like this is what labor movements look like, and for most of our lifetimes we haven't really had one of those. So like that is something we should see as a thing we can encourage and participate in. I'm in a local, and I'm a union local, and I'm our labor council rep and stuff. And, it takes some time, but it feels good to be, part of how the organization can happen. And politically, I mean, you have so many incredibly safe Democrat districts in the United States that should be contested and won by cool socialists. And obviously, it's taking place from, lots of boring, unremarkable civil positions across the country all the way up to the Chicago mayoralty, to the extent that's an influential position, which is pretty debatable. But these things are happening. Cool people can find a district where they have roots and who are telegenic and find a beatable, shitty corporate Democrat and try to beat them. We do that in my district. I've been trying to help Rebecca Parsons, who's a very cool DSA socialist with lots of great housing policies, which are a really big deal out here on the West Coast. She's, we struggle to put her up against our congressman, who is Derick Kilmer, who's the head of the new Democrat caucus in the House, which is the great, Clinton conservative Democrat caucus, very pro-business, which sucks. These are areas where we can push, and sometimes we get people in, and then you're getting your socialist ideas on media that people see. You bring in people. I mean, this is, it's tiny, annoying steps, but that's, I think, where we're at right now. Anyway, I mean, that's my first reaction.
Yeah, I think, I will say this. I do think we need to be honest with people about union leadership right now, because we've seen.
Oh God, I know. Yeah, I mean, I'm an AFT, and they endorse Hillary before they even do a poll of us. Just insanely offensive. Yeah.
Yeah, the Randy Weingartner going to Ukraine thing was something for me.
Thank goodness. I really feel like I'm being represented. My main concern at work has been Ukraine, and are we doing enough to get a nuclear war going? We should try harder.
Yeah. So this is one of these times where I do think I'm in agreement with you that we have a moment of real labor militancy. Actually, I'm on record as being a skeptic of the actual union leadership of that labor militancy. But I think what's going to be interesting about this, and this is again as a moment of dark hope. One of the reasons why the later labor leadership has been so complacent is bond and real estate, commercial real estate investment, which is about to take a really big hit.
Oh, yeah.
So it's
commercial real estate right now. Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, that is such a long legacy of the labor movement. Is the senior leadership becoming little capitalists who run little labor corporations. Yeah, that's something that you've always got to be dealing with and trying to come up with new ways to bind their decisions to membership, votes or referenda or something. That's a struggle in itself for sure. And you love to. Oh my God, all these Starbucks shops getting unionized in the face of Howard Schultz. Oh, inject that directly into my nervous system. It's so great. But of course, these are all people who are mostly joining SEIU affiliated locals. And I don't think, is Andy Stern still in charge of the SEIU? Who knows? I mean, the SEIU's record is a mixed record. But getting people into a corporate union that needs a lot of work. I mean, I don't know. After 40 years of no labor movement, I feel pretty good about that as a start. But you're completely right. I mean, the first thing these people got to realize is, great, you want a bargaining unit. Sooner or later, all these new bargaining units have to take on our shitty leadership. And, the Teamsters are making it work, and they've got a, big fat strike around the corner, barring contract breakthroughs. So we'll see, but you're completely right about that. I mean, the record of national level, especially union leadership in this country, is a frigging atrocious. So that's a very, very good faith thing to tell people coming into the labor movement now. Is it's not just all over now that you're in a local.
No. Yeah, I think that's what we should be doing. But I also think we need to be in the union. I like you, I'm a rep. And I think you kind of have to be. So like when people hear me, like they was like, "Oh, you slag on unions all the time," and I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm in one, and
from the inside, yeah.
like it's because I'm frustrated with things inside." And I will admit, with teachers unions, there's also, we have some advantages. We're hard to scab on, but we have some disadvantages. State legislatures can just do shit to us.
Yeah, we're at their mercy a lot of the time. It's true.
Because we're exempted from the National Labor Relations Act, as is almost all state workers. So
yeah.
It's an interesting battle. Yeah, I like you're hesitant to make predictions right now because, for example, I don't even know which states are going to be red states anymore because the abortion thing actually is playing out in a strange way. Like, I mean, I guess we can say Florida is going to be pretty safe. Apparently, they're going to pass abortion restrictions so severe that even conservatives are worried about it.
Indeed. North Dakota just went down to a 6-week ban this afternoon. Yeah, it's happening now.
Yeah,
and it's incredible. Like you have Trump saying, "I think it's going to hurt us. Naturally, I think it's going to hurt us. This abortion thing. Like you caused it, you fucking rich simpleton." Amazing to see that.
I think, and not to defend Trump, but I think he's actually shocked that they actually really meant it. Like one of the things I've learned about Trump is Trump, I think, is actually surprised that people believe the bullshit he says.
It's true. Trump is, I mean, no one, despite all these recent media entities, no one's more of a media entity primarily than Donald Trump. And anytime one of their like policies becomes like an actual change and moves the marble walls of our institutions in this way, it's like unsettling. Like you tell he doesn't like it. Like he's alarmed by it, and for all of his idiocy, I mean, you have to recognize he has very good evil political instincts. He's like, I think this is going to hurt us, and then they lost the most winnable. And like you said, in 2022 last year, like it's of limited victory to see like a bunch of Democrats come in or keep their Senate majority. Hey, girl. Although it's great to see a bunch of Republicans eat shit, though, like that aspect is fantastic. So, it speaks to the fact that people were wondering if Roe, having been, that big, tailwind for conservative organizing all these years, will shift and do the opposite for the left. One hopes. Early signs are that people are pretty pissed off about it. So we're able to get some momentum, and all it took was women losing their rights. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty horrifying. We've been kind of darker today. I think anyone who's looking at the economic trends of the current environment has to be a little bit darker, but let's try to end on something a little hopeful. What are the positive trends, if there are any, that you see upcoming for say left-wing organizers, socialists, labor, etc.?
Yeah, we're winning visible battles. I mean, the Chicago thing, big city mayoral, offices are pretty limited in their power, but they're great for like showing you can do it. And I mean, to me, the biggest trend is just looking at today's young people. Like they are themselves are growing up with wide, horrified eyes at everything happening in the world and how the clock is ticking down on them when they're just, coming into awareness of what's happening. Like the left, if we can run out the clock on this, like time is on our side to this specific extent that like these younger generations have far more left-wing views. I mean, almost wall to wall on subjects. And that's something that can matter to the extent we can hang on to the political franchise and keep any decisions in the political realm and out of the friggin' Supreme Court's robes in general. Like, I mean, that's very favorable, people have a widening openness to like major economic changes and even specifically the S word, which of course we should definitely take with a grain of salt. I mean, socialism is almost as empty of a word as liberalism is. You have to be specific because it means people use it in 50 different ways. But like that's encouraging, especially with zero media support. Like these things are broadly favorable. Like it's relatively good organizing material out there. I think it's 80% of Americans support. I think it's 80% of Democrats support Medicare for all. 70% of the national electorate. I mean, that's phenomenal. We got to organize around that shit. So we've got like good raw materials. What happens is, we're all so much on our phones now and spending so much time online. Like that becomes so much of the aperture through which we view reality. Like it's hard there because it's such a dumb parody of how we live our lives. So say people, don't focus on your shitty online environment, especially now that Professor Idiot is buying it and ruining it and fucking with it nonstop, your favorite online social platforms. If you're out actually like talking to people and doing something in your local or in some kind of political entity, you will feel better and it will help you deal with this shit. We've got like real political and labor-based events happening that, man, as tenuous and vulnerable and compromised by shitty leadership, as you said, like these movements totally are, compared to 5 years ago when we had none of this, I am very grateful for it.
Actually, yeah, I think that's interesting, actually. One thing I will say is on one hand, we saw growth in union numbers for the first time actually at the beginning of the aught teens. And we kind of not seen them generally except in specific sectors, although I'm glad they're the sectors that they're in. I mean, like services, like food services unionized by like 0.5 or 1.5% or something pathetically low like that. It's real low. And so just proving that it's even viable, because that's been the general assumption is like even non-franchise corporate houses, when intersecting with Taft-Hartley and all that, led to like, oh, you can't really do anything with the food service anyway. They're transitory workers. You can only like get, I don't know, 10 people per shop. So if like this, the reason why the Starbucks thing is important is because if it's viable and if they actually can get a good labor contract out of it, that is a reversal of a 100-year trend. So that's good. And there's going to be a big battle, I think, over this whole reshoring thing, which after the Fed quits trying to lower our to raise our unemployment rate, to lower employment. Let me figure out how to say that right. Once it quits trying to do that as a last ditch effort to somehow stop inflation, which probably won't work, we are going to be in the need to reshore a lot of things. That's one of the potential advantages for the U.S. of a multipolar world, for U.S. citizens, not for U.S. rich people. Because we're going to have to, like, the cost of transactions are just going to be really high. We've already seen that with COVID. And so the next battle is going to be make sure those new jobs come in are unionized in the way that they would have been in the 1940s and 50s, and they aren't like neoliberalized shit jobs. And what I'm going to say is, like, that for me, that's a place of opportunity, but it will be a hard fought fight, because when we achieved this last time, we were on the up end of the profitability scale, and now we are not. Like,
Indeed. If you look at like the new moves to re-onshore some of our industries, I mean, the big one so far is the chip industry, because God forbid we keep getting them from across the Pacific, where Taiwan and China have their continuing dispute. Like the public subsidies, the Inflation Reduction Act, which had so much of this climate and ship reshoring subsidy money in it, like they do come with like various conditions. They include like provision of on-site childcare, competitive wages. It might have been union scale wages, I think, but I don't think there's a specific provision about requiring card check for employees or anything like that really would like make a significant difference there. So time will tell. And of course, like the industry itself is constantly lobbying to get successive legislation passed to exempt them from those requirements. And every Wall Street Journal editorial is talking about how smart it would be to not make companies have to provide anything for their workforce in exchange for all the public money and then the insane profits that they make in the industry. So, like there's a little bit of that recognition, at least among elites, but I mean, it's already a pretty wimpy requirement and they're backing away from it now. TSMC, like, Taiwan, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company that makes all of our big phone CPUs. Hey, girl. they've announced like publicly that they intend to like lobby against having to follow those various pretty mild like pro-labor provisions, like the provision of childcare that come with those subsidies. Like, we'll take the money, we're going to keep fighting on having to spend a little bit of it to provide some daytime care for the workforce's kids. Amazing. So you're right, it's going to be a hard battle. Like, the tiny bit of it that's in the IRA is already like getting resisted. I mean, a big surprise, but that just shows like it is correct. You are right. Like, there will none of that will be like thoughtfully recognized as, we really should do this. That is not going to happen.
No, but it is a place of possibility, and what I think is in other places. So, like, again, my thing is always like, we need to be honest about how hard this fight is, but it is actually a fight that is actually winnable. Indeed. There are other fights that aren't winnable. Like,
it's true. It's true. This is not exactly the Palestinian right of return. Like, this is something that we actually might be able to achieve.
Right. I mean, so, my favorite one is like a universal jobs guarantee. And I'm like, that's not winnable with a whole lot of other stuff happening first.
That's one of those things. That's like victory number 300 on the list. Like, we have so much to do to get to. Yeah, a jobs guarantee or a UBI or whatever. I mean, none of those things are anything close to the balance of political forces we have now. People do just need to realize that, especially younger people who feel like we just have a few, next year we'll get, Sanders in and then this will all change. Like, it's going to take more than your lifetime to deal with all this stuff. People don't sometimes, have that longer term picture.
Yeah, and I get why that feels really pressing when we have climate change, and who knows? Sometimes it does seem like our bourgeoisie wants to just like go out in a big flaming nuclear war, so that there's no one after them. Which I laugh because it's so horrifying. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, I mean, they do have their own kids. Like, I always say, remind people, like bourgeoisie, like the amount that they invest in their shitty kids is a lot. Like, they want a continuation of society that they continue to be in charge of and be the elites and pat themselves on the back while they have expensive lunches and rely on the labor of the working class. Like, they want to go on. People who are in charge are the ones who have an incentive to keep the system going. But it's also because the system has so many freaking contradictions that they kind of don't want to recognize, dynamics of escalation in the wars that they love, including Ukraine right now, God help us, and all the shortcomings of the system and the instability of private investment. I mean, all this stuff. They don't quite want to recognize that, or if they do, in a very technocratic manner, we can fix and maintain things. So I try to reassure myself by thinking, the rich and powerful don't want things to, completely fall apart. But they're idiots like everyone else. I mean, they didn't see 2016 coming. They were surprised by COVID. They didn't expect 2008. Like, all these things surprised all of us. They surprised them. So they have an interest in keeping things going, but they're as, dumb and short-sighted as your average greedy douche.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good place to end it on, because it's an important reminder that, and I will say that it's important and reminder because it's also both terrifying but a bit of hope, because whenever people, like the people who are like, well, the CIA and they're running everything, and I'm like, I just don't see evidence that they're that competent. Like,
indeed, they fuck up like all the time. Like, are you aware? Like, I mean, CIA is a great case. Like, are you familiar with the Bay of Pigs? Are you familiar with Watergate? Like, are you familiar with? You're like, oh my god! I mean, it's like a record of bungling. And for every Operation Ajax that succeeds in overthrowing Iran, there's 2 Bays of Pigs. I mean, it's filled with dummies, just like every other institution. And they have leaks, and they have successes, and they have like big fat fuck ups. To be expected when we imagine these people are omnipotent or able to completely stop things. That's when we, I think, go too far. And above all, we must remember our dignity. Dignity, I say.
Yeah. And similar with the bourgeoisie, like the heroic bourgeoisie of the Fordist period is long dead. Like, those people were competent, but they're not here anymore.
That's a rising ruling class, and it does make a difference. It's true. I mean, those people, in like the New Deal era, I mean, that was the, born out of labor, but then it, does also become like the 1950s American system of dominating the world. So, definitely capable of traveling in dark directions. But with a competent ruling class, you can rule a global system of imperial management for several decades before Vietnam even makes you begin to question it. So
Right.
it's true. Like there's competence, and then there's just the whole world of illusions you need to be a rich person or a powerful person who doesn't friggin' hate themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not putting up a whole lot of faith in class traders, but I imagine there's going to be a few because occasionally people have consciences. That does happen. So,
And, you need some Frederick Engels in there. I
right.
mean, you need those little sources of those little opportunities for resources are no small thing for us.
Yeah, there were a few millionaires who backed the Bolsheviks too. So I mean, like it does happen. But I also think you can't depend on them like at all.
No, you can't depend on them arriving or staying. Like it's
Right.
strictly it's like a video game power up with this limited window. You've got certain opportunity to get what you can out of it before they go. My investment advisor told me to move my money in a different direction.
Yep. So I guess this is where we can wrap up. But I want to ask you, because ironically, even though we're a socialist podcast, we exempt in a weird petty bourgeois rentier market. Do you have anything to plug?
Sure, and I appreciate that. Yes, I mean, of course. Well, it's always my. Sorry, I have a cat on me now.
That's okay.
My library of very fine books you can use to understand capitalism a lot better. My book, Capitalism versus Freedom, The Toll Road to Serfdom, which I wrote to be a single volume refutation of Hayek and Friedman's writing on libertarianism. So if an audience member would like to have a very full picture, I mean, I wouldn't want to say a definitive book, but a book that addresses all the main aspects is still a fun read, if I dare say so, like actually enjoyable to consume. Like that's a very strong option that some of your listeners might especially like. And I have an article on the Federal Reserve itself and its ugly tightening cycle that we're in right now. I think it's in the next issue of Current Affairs. I think it's the next issue, which I think is the May-June. Current Affairs, great magazine. People should consider subscribing. We still have very, very fine contributors, beautiful art in that thing. So those are pretty fun opportunities for people who want to learn more about our twisted economic system. They should check it out.
All right. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, I will vouch for your Capitalism versus Freedom book. In fact, it's right over there.
Nice.
So
I'll just see it on shelves.
Yeah. So it's and also not only did I buy the book, I didn't use my power because I'm also one of the people who accepted the book. But that's how I discovered Rob, actually. But wasn't I was in the voting committee for that book when it came into zero. Oh God,
that's hilarious. I didn't realize that.
14, 15. Yeah. Yeah, I was one of those guys. So I definitely suggest people read that book, and I think your Bit Tyrants is also pretty useful to read. Although as I've been saying, I have no idea how much this is about to change, because I feel like all those I agree with you, they're still staying dominant, but oh my God, are they losing money? And people ask me where that money is going, and I'm like, it's not going anywhere. It's just being decreated. Like it's just
it's market equity. It can just dematerialize. Oh yeah. And that's mainly Meta itself. And Meta was doing fine until they decided to just pour money into Mark Zuckerberg's masturbation fantasy. They were going strong until then, and the core business is hanging on. It's no longer. When I wrote the book, the big five, Microsoft, Apple, Google, Amazon, and Facebook were the five biggest companies in the world, and they were all in tech, which is very unusual. Now it's those four, and I think Berkshire Hathaway replaced Facebook, or actually might be Tesla now. But tech's dominance of the top is still very real, and my big prediction in the book that tech would become kind of co-dominant with Wall Street. At the core of capitalism and sort of how it operates and how it allocates capital. I feel like that's holding up pretty good. I mean, Silicon Valley Bank shows how real it is. It's a mixture of both sectors. It's a VC catering bank that then has a giant crash. Both of the systems are manifest there. Both of the sectors are manifest there. So I feel like it's holding up okay, relevance-wise so far. A lot of the big developments have been in just tech-adjacent industries. And so far, other than the European Union, the limited amount of screws being put on these companies so far, lots of pissed-off people. But they could, they have a pretty good block on the legislature. I don't see any real legislation coming after them. The courts are mostly on their side in terms of the existing interpretation of the trade laws and the Fair Trade Act. So time will tell. But so far, the book's relevance, I feel like, has held up pretty good. Although, in fairness, I am planning on writing a sequel in a year or two once some more shit goes down. One of many other books I got to get around to.
Yep. Yeah. Well, we'll be looking out for it. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Sure, my pleasure, CD.
All right.
That's great. I didn't know you were with Verso, man. That's funny.